right, good morning.
Good morning.
I was so nervous earlier, but wow, what a great moment for us to share together and breathe and relax and come back into our bodies. Well, it is such an honor to be here with you this morning. My name is SunAh Laybourn. I'm an associate professor of sociology at the University of Memphis. I am a Korean adoptee, and I'm also a plant mom. I feel like there are some plant lovers in the room. Yes, plant lovers or gardeners? Okay, I felt like I was in good company. Well, it was during the pandemic for me that plants became my hobby. So many of you, if you remember back to 2020, maybe you were baking bread or getting a cat. But for me, it was plants. It started out as one plant and then two plants, and then soon enough, it was a couple dozen. Now, since I'm not married and I don't have any children and I don't even have any pets, I quickly found my apartment filled with beautiful, life-giving plants. Now, I know what you're thinking. Agoo, not married, no children. I know, it's okay, just go with me. But since I do live in an apartment, as I mentioned, all of my plants are indoor plants, which means I often find myself repotting plants. So moving them from a smaller pot to a larger pot so they can grow. One of the first plants I got was a monstera. Let's see if we have a picture of it. Maybe, maybe not. It's okay. Are y'all familiar with monstera plants? Okay. Plant people, y'all know what a monstera looks like. So at first I got a really small one, right? It was on a really cute pot on my coffee table. But over a few short years, it grew, as plants do. It grew, it grew, it grew. It grew tall, almost taller than me, and it grew wide, almost wider than me. Can we go forward? Let's see if we can show you this beautiful monstera. So there we go, looks small, so cute, very cutesy. And then if we could go to the next one, and then there it is. So beautiful. Well, I don't know if you know this, but in the wild, a monstera can grow up to 80 feet tall. Now, of course, even in the largest pot I could find, it wouldn't grow that tall in my apartment, right? You have the ceiling, it would get in the way. But more than that, it would need much more soil so that its roots could go down deeper, so it could get all the nutrients it needed, but also so that it could anchor itself. Have you ever seen a monstera seed? No? Okay, don't worry, I haven't either, I Googled this, all right? It looks like a little pistachio to me, and I love pistachios. So anyway, this is a monstera seed. Now here, the thing is about seeds is that they contain all the genetic information that they need to grow into that beautiful monstera plant that you saw before. No matter how much you might want pothos or a ficus or a fiddle-leaf fig, the plant will become what the seed holds. Could you go to the next slide? So here are some of my plant babies. So beautiful, but only the monstera seed would produce a monstera plant, right? In much the same way, even though I was adopted to the US, immigrating from Korea to the southern United States, specifically growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, just down the street from here, and raised in a white family, I would always grow into the Korean woman you see before you today. Like the 150,000 plus Korean adoptees who have been adopted to the US since the 1950s, I may have moved from one soil to another, one pot to another, but the seed remained the same. No matter how much I wish I could have simply blended into my white family, no matter how much family members try to make me feel just like another family member by pointing out seemingly shared physical features or personality traits, no matter how much family members tried to ignore that I was in fact not white, as if I'm not saying anything, our distinctions would simply go away, I would always grow into the blueprint of my DNA. However, while plants simply follow their genetic instructions, people, we like to chart our own path. As a sociologist, in my research about the Korean adoptee experience, Among adoptees that I've interviewed or surveyed, there are a few themes that we share as we make sense of what it means to be adopted and Korean, particularly as we find ourselves in families, communities, and countries that often make us feel a little bit out of place. So I'm going to share with you a few themes. So some adoptees do desire to simply blend in with their families. They think nothing of their Korean heritage. They aren't really interested in exploring their Korean heritage. They're not interested in returning to Korea, connecting with other Korean adoptees, or searching for birth family. They maybe have some limited or sporadic interest in these things, but for the most part, they've decided that where they belong is with their white families, with their white friends, in their white communities. But even among these adoptees who would say that they're white, just like their family members and friends, they still experience being made to feel out of place, of moments where their Koreanness marks them as different and not in a good way. They may feel like they're at home in whiteness, but they also acknowledge that others don't always see them that way. Now, some adoptees do explore their Korean heritage. They embark on learning Korean language, they travel back to Korea, they may even live there for a period of time, and some even successfully search for birth family. However, many of these adoptees find it difficult to be fully accepted in Korea, since their language skills, they're not perfect, and since they're still trying to learn the nuances of Korean culture. Similarly, here in the United States, adoptees are often excluded from the Korean community for those same reasons. The places where adoptees have been told by others that they should belong and where they themselves want to be included are often just another site where they feel out of place. Korean adoptees experience these refusals of belonging, these moments where they're told that they don't belong. Yet we simultaneously want to be accepted for all of who we are, even as sometimes we're still in the process of figuring it out or becoming comfortable with all we were created to be. Whether you are a Korean adoptee or not, whether you're stuck between two cultures or not, you have a need to belong. We all do. It's one of the distinctions that make us human. We need community. We need relationships. It's in our DNA. In fact, we are created to be social creatures, and without social connections, we simply won't thrive. Just like soil gives plants the nutrients they need to grow, our community connections give us what we need to grow. Social connections contribute to our emotional health, our mental health, and even our physical health. Research finds that strong, supportive social connections can help people live longer and healthier lives. Studies show that strong social connections, like the ones that you make here through KAWA, are linked to increased chance of longevity, a better immune system, less inflammation, and faster recovery from disease. When you feel more connected to others, you are less vulnerable to anxiety and depression, and have higher self-esteem, empathy, and trust towards others. All of that just through the social connections that you're making. For many Korean adoptees, we find these supportive social connections among other adoptees. Since as early as the 1980s, Korean adoptees have been finding one another through word of mouth, flyers on bulletin boards, with the help of even news stories, and then with the internet, through email listservs, online groups, and even now through YouTube channels, blogs, social media, and adoptee conferences. Korean adoptees have been creating communities online and in person where we can explore and create together what it means to be adopted and Korean. Outside of the assumptions and expectations of being Korean enough or American enough, Korean adoptees have created spaces to simply be, because we already are enough. It's in our DNA. In our own spaces, we can exist outside the questions, curiosities, and constraints of others. We don't have to be perpetual children, as adoptees are often seen as. We don't have to be grateful or happy, as adoptees are often expected to be. We don't even have to be silent about our pain, our grief, our curiosities about Korean heritage, or even our anger. So one of the primary ways that the adoptee story is told, and maybe what you're familiar with and what you've seen in media portrayals or movies or even news stories, is adoptees as babies or young children. This framing, however, freezes adoptees into childhood. But adopted children grow up, and our adoptee experience extends beyond the stories of rescue or being saved. Our stories are more than children finding forever families, and our stories are more than our adoptive parents finally having children to raise as their own. But it's this framing of adoptees as children frozen in childhood that leads to the expectations that adoptees can only feel grateful or happy. Grateful for being saved, grateful for being rescued, grateful for being in their forever family, grateful for being raised in the US. These demands for gratitude assume that adoption is always better, that the US is always better, and leaves no room for adoptees to be curious about their birth families, their birth culture, or their birth country. The demands for gratitude leave no room for adoptees to grieve the losses that we've experienced. And we've experienced many losses, not only the tangible losses of family, but also those intangible losses of culture, of first language, and the ruptures to our sense of security. For some adoptees, these losses continue and they compound into adulthood when adoptees find out that they aren't US citizens. They weren't citizens in the country that they've grown up in the country that they've called home. Because there was no standardized automatic process ensuring US citizenship of international adoptees, at least not prior to the Child Citizenship Act of 2000, and because many adoptees were over the age limit when that legislation was passed, there are countless international adoptees who are vulnerable to deportation. Some have already been deported. Understandably, adoptees do not feel grateful or happy at the prospect of they themselves or other adoptees like them being uprooted from American soil. Adoptees should not be expected to feel gratitude or happiness at the country that they've called home, the country that chose to take them from their birth home, refusing to enact legislation to correct the citizenship loophole they created. But when adoptees are only seen as children, adoptee adults become invisible. Adoptees as children deserve to be saved. Adoptees as adults are unrecognizable and thus unsavable. But in our adoptee spaces, we see one another. We recognize ourselves in one another. Among one another, we create the environment where we can get some of the support we need that comes from sharing space with other people with the same lived experience. In the safe soil of Korean adoptee spaces, we find some of the essential nutrients that other environments can't provide. But just like good soil for plants consists of a few key ingredients, good soil for adoptees needs a mix of materials too. So for plants to truly thrive, their soil needs the right balance of minerals, water, gas, organic material, and living organisms. And we too need more than just our adoptee spaces to nourish us. In fact, we need all of our environments to offer the same types of inclusion that adoptee spaces provide. When tending to plants, you might be familiar with the need for fertilizer and water. You might even have your plants on a fertilizer and watering schedule. I know I do, otherwise I will forget. But to truly grow, plant soil needs organic material and living organisms. The living organisms help decompose the organic material. Let me break it down. To put it plainly, bacteria, worms, and other insects help break down things like manure. In the same way, we need people to contribute to our rich soil by helping us break down some of the manure we've encountered. You know, those unpleasant experiences we've had, the rejections, the exclusions, being made to feel out of place. We need our families, our friends, our communities, and all of you to contribute to our safe soil so we can grow into the fullness of who we were meant to be. DNA is the genetic material that makes us who we are. It determines our physical characteristics and even helps to shape our personality. But just like plants, it is the condition of the soil that will determine how well we grow, if we struggle to thrive or if we flourish quickly. While I would always become a Korean woman, I haven't always felt like I was Korean enough. Throughout most of my life, I didn't feel rooted enough in my Koreanness. For many adoptees, if we don't have a sizable Korean population where we grew up, or any Korean American community at all, or even if we did, we're often made to feel like we don't belong to it. In those cases, we tend to rely on our adoption paperwork to give us some sense of rootedness in our Korean heritage. However, the lawsuit by Peter Moeller and the Danish Korean Rights Group and the subsequent investigation by Korea's Truth and Reconciliation Commission have shown pattern deception and fraud throughout adoptees' adoption paperwork. While many of us within the adoptee community have known that our paperwork was not accurate and sometimes completely fabricated, the TRC's findings have confirmed in a very undeniable way many of our fears. On the other hand, for some adoptees, the press coverage and news stories shattered illusions of purely benevolent motives on behalf of Korean and US social services and adoption agencies, and raised questions about if they were truly relinquished by their birth families or if they were knowingly and maliciously separated. When what you thought kept you rooted can no longer anchor you, it can lead you to question everything you thought you knew, all of who you thought you were. Throughout most of my life, it didn't matter what my paperwork did or didn't say, it still wasn't enough to make me feel Korean. Koreanness, it isn't in paperwork, it isn't in adoption files. Instead, it seemed to me what it meant to be truly Korean was defined by language fluency, cultural customs, being able to trace my lineage, all elements that weren't available to me in the soil where I was planted. It seemed like I was always falling short of what it meant to belong as a Korean American. But when I think about some of the earliest waves of Korean immigration to the United States, it was Korean wives of US servicemen, and it was Korean adoptees, both groups of Koreans who were allowed to immigrate despite anti-Asian immigration policies. Our experience is distinctly part of what it means to be Korean in America. The soil may have been foreign, but yet we grew. The interesting thing about plant roots is that they're actually really great at reading the soil. I bet you didn't know that plant roots could read, but they can. They can determine if the soil has what it needs, and if it doesn't, the roots can actually exude chemicals to change it, to break up hard soil or repair nutrient deficient soil. In the same way, even though I found myself in soil that was sometimes hard or that didn't have the nourishment that I maybe didn't even know that I needed, I am determined to create the space for my roots to grow. I learned that even if the soil doesn't have everything I need, the seed still does. The thing about seeds is that they contain all the genetic material that they need to become the plants we see. Sometimes it's just a matter of embracing who we were always meant to be. Plants, they simply follow their encoded blueprint, but sometimes we need to decide it's okay to be who we already are. So even though I may not speak Korean or be able to trace my lineage, even though I maybe only started celebrating Chuseok a few years ago, and I can only cook a couple Korean dishes, every day I wake up as a Korean woman, adopted or not. But imagine how much more we all could grow if we saw ourselves in one another, recognizing our shared seeds, and committed to creating safe soil where we all can thrive.